Hello and welcome to the garden. Well, I'm in the fruit cage today for a quick little job with the cherry trees. So I've got a row of 5 sweet cherries here, and they can be a bit of a challenge because they are ordinarily rather vigorous trees with an upright habit. So they can quite easily get out of hand in a garden situation. I've got some sour cherries elsewhere that I'm fan training. The sour cherry, it has an annoying fruiting habit, a bit like the peaches, and then it only fruits on 1-year-old wood. So there's quite a lot of work to do with the pruning of those. You need to do regular renewal pruning, otherwise you don't get any fruit. But the trees themselves are easier to manage because they are a lot more compact. The sweet cherry naturally is a fairly big tree, so I don't have a huge amount of space in the fruit cage, so I need to do something here to allow me to grow the 5 varieties that I've chosen to put here. There are 2 things I'm doing to control ordinarily the excess vigor of the cherry trees. And the first is I've got them on a dwarfing rootstock. I've got them on Gisela 5. Now you may or may not be able to find cherry trees on Gisela 5 in your local garden centre, but specialist nurseries should have that rootstock available and plenty of interesting varieties to put on them. I can't remember where I bought these cherry trees actually. They could have come from Keeper's Nursery or RV Roger. I can't remember where I bought them from. But anyway, all 5 of those are on Gisela 5. That's a pretty dwarfing rootstock. There are others that will produce an even smaller tree, but those rootstocks are not so readily available, and that might actually be too dwarfing for this site. So the soil here along the edge of the fruit cage, it's not the best in the garden by any means. It's still a bit stony and a little bit poor. That also will reduce the vigor of these plants. The other thing I'm doing is I'm following a method, more or less, I'm adapting a method known as upright fruiting offshoots, or UFOs. I think that's a fairly modern approach to training sweet cherries, and the idea is that you lay down the main stem and train up a number of vertical offshoots. Now ordinarily vertical growth is quite vigorous, and that's not exactly what you want, but the idea here is to have an entire wall of vertical growth and the vigor distributed amongst those stems. And it's quite convenient for in the fruit cage here because I'm growing in a plane like an espalier or a cordon. It's all grown in one plane here, and hopefully I end up with a whole wall of fruit. It's not going quite to plan at the moment. They certainly are not overly vigorous at this stage. Some of them have hardly done a thing, and some of them I need to do a little bit of pruning on. So you can't prune these during the winter. They're best pruned after bud break and through to the end of summer, because they are rather prone to various diseases, and if you prune during the winter they are much more likely to be infected. So I've been waiting until after bud break to take a look at these and do just a little bit of pruning. Now there's not a huge amount of growth on some of these, so this should be a quick job. So these plants have been in for 1 year, and at the moment I don't have that complete wall of vertical shoots. I'm hoping that this year they develop a lot more of those, but there are 1 or 2 of them that are too vigorous, and the method to deal with those is to cut those back quite hard. I'll leave a stump of some length. I want to see where they have buds or shoots developing, and I will cut those back, and then I'll get a couple of side shoots. Now those side shoots will tend to be less vigorous, especially if I allow 2 of them to grow instead of just the 1, and that way I can hopefully manage the vigor amongst the vertical shoots that I've got. So this one is not looking too bad. I've got lots of new growth here, and I've also got quite a lot of flowers. Most of those flowers are clustered down the base of this 1-year-old wood, which is where you'd expect to see them. That I need to gently move to this side of the trellising. There's nothing to do here. I could put an extra tie on here to just keep that down, but actually it's not looking too bad. I've got 4 vertical shoots. None of them are too vigorous. You want to look at the stem diameter here compared with the main branch and judge whether that is too much. I will have to separate those slightly. I could train that one off to the side a little bit, but that's not a problem. And I'm hoping that further down this stem I will get some new shoots coming up. I can see a couple there on their way, and hopefully this one is going to give me that development this year with the more shoots along the length here. You can grow these on up until you run out of height, and eventually they'll become unproductive, and you can then cut them back near the base and have renewal growth there. But this one is looking fine. I'm not going to do anything with that. Well, this one is also looking quite nice actually. I've got the main stem laid down. I've got 3 vertical shoots. I probably don't need them any closer than that. I will probably end up with 1 or 2 more from that end this year, and further down the stem there's new growth coming, so hopefully this one will also fill in nicely. This is a thin branch. This is perfect. This one is a little bit more chunky. I think that one's still okay. It's around about half the diameter of the main stem. I think that one's all right, but this one here I think is far too vigorous. It's not quite the same diameter as the main stem, but it is heading that way, probably a good 3/4 of the diameter. So this one needs to be pruned, and now all these shoots are out, I can see what I'm doing and where I might want to prune it. So that's fruit, but there's a growth bud there, that's quite nice, and there's a shoot there. So I could prune this quite hard back there. I could also cut this back somewhere higher up, and the idea would be to take 2 shoots there. I am inclined to hedge my bet slightly and cut this one just a little bit higher up. So I think what I'll do to start with is take that out there. I don't want to damage that shoot, so I'll try and be careful. Right, that is fine. So if that still grows too vigorous, I can always cut it a bit further back, but hopefully now I get regrowth here, and these will be weaker than this one was. So that is the idea, and I can take one of these vertically, one off to the side a little bit. If this one turns out to be too vigorous, I will cut that out entirely and just keep a weaker one. I will just see what happens to grow here and respond to that appropriately. So long as the new wood is not too vigorous, it can stay. Well, this sad specimen is Waterloo. There's nothing wrong with the tree itself. It's perfectly healthy, but there's nothing to do here. It's got some flower and it's got more coming out up here. I will have to tie that in a little lower, stop that bending in the wrong direction, but essentially there's nothing to do here. But I've got this new growth coming at various points, and hopefully this will give me the vertical shoots. But apart from tying that branch down, nothing to do with this one. So this one's not too bad. I need to drop the end here down to the cane. That's a nice shoot. That's nice. They're both reasonably thin. Again, lots of blossom around the base of these shoots. This one here though is looking a little bit too vigorous. I've got a new shoot starting there from the center of this cluster. That will be very handy for filling in this space. I've got a new one down here. That's looking all right. So I will get something from this one as well. So overall, this is looking pretty good. I think this one though, may be just a little bit too vigorous. So again, I want to cut that back. I don't want to be too drastic with it. I think there'll be fine. I've got a couple of nice shoots I can take away from there to start filling in this wall, and we'll see what happens. I could possibly cut that further down. Actually, there are two very nice shoots down at the base. These two shoots here look quite good actually, so I'm going to cut that further back. Yeah, that will be ideal. The growth then with these should be weaker than this one. This one wasn't too bad, but I think it would be better off cut back at this stage rather than allowed to become too vigorous this season. So this one here, this needs to be laid down. I will tie that into place in a minute. It's produced almost nothing in terms of vertical shoots, just this one at the beginning. I've got suitably placed new growth coming all the way along, so I think this season it will start to fill this in. This though, it's not too vigorous right this minute, but I rather suspect it might become too vigorous and come to dominate these others. So I'm going to cut this one back as well. I mean, there's really nothing to lose here in doing so. I will take that back, I think. It's coming slightly off the back side of the trunk here, so I don't want to cut it too far down. I think, oh, there's a nice shoot there and another there, so I'll cut that back to that there. And at least these two will develop quite vigorously. And yeah, hopefully that will give these others a chance to have a go as well. So pruning these UFO cherries is actually a fairly simple job. There's nothing complicated to do here. All I have to do to sort these out, keep laying down the extension growth until I get as far as I need to. Probably this season, most of these will have gone as long as I want them to, and I can just keep cutting them back to one bud at the end. And then it's a case of managing the vigor of those vertical shoots and trying to get that growth more or less even across the whole length. Eventually, these vertical shoots will get to the top of the trellising here, and at that point I will need to top them, and eventually they will become unproductive, or let's say less productive, at which point I can cut them out low down and encourage some regrowth there. So that's the sort of longer term maintenance, but I'm not there at this point, so all I have to do is just keep an eye on the vertical growth and tackle anything that looks a little bit too vigorous. It's certainly a mixed bag along this row. Some of the varieties have put on more growth than others, but they all look as though they are in good condition and they should be developing nicely this season, and I'm quite excited about this. I am reasonably hopeful that this will work nicely in this space, and it will let me have 5 different varieties of sweet cherry without taking up a huge amount of room and without the birds being able to steal any of it. Anyway, that is all for this video. Thanks ever so much for watching, and bye for now.